The Return of Sherlock Holmes, 1905. Episode 2. The Adventure of the Norwood Builder. Welcome back, fellow detectives. Last time, we witnessed the impossible. Sherlock Holmes returning from the dead after 3 years. You might think that after such a dramatic resurrection, Holmes would ease back into detective work with simpler cases. But fate has other plans. Today, we face a case where all the evidence points to one man's guilt, where Scotland Yard is convinced they have their killer, and where even an innocent man's own lawyer has given up hope. When everyone believes the truth is obvious, that's precisely when Holmes's genius becomes most necessary. Are you ready to prove that sometimes the most convincing evidence is nothing more than an elaborate lie? Picture yourself at Baker Street on a bright summer morning in 1894, just weeks after Holmes's dramatic return. You're having breakfast with Holmes and Watson when the sound of hurried footsteps thunders up the stairs. The door bursts open, and a young man stumbles in, wild-eyed, disheveled, clearly terrified and exhausted. "Mr. Holmes," he gasps, barely able to speak. "They're after me. The police are coming to arrest me for murder, but I swear I'm innocent. You're my only hope." Notice how his hands are trembling, his collar is askew, and there's genuine panic radiating from every pore. Is this the desperation of an innocent man, or the performance of a clever murderer? Holmes studies the young man with that penetrating gaze you've come to recognize. "Calm yourself, sir. Sit down, catch your breath, and tell me your name." The stranger collapses into a chair. "John Hector McFarlane. I'm a solicitor with a practice in Blackheath. Last night, I drew up a will for a builder named Jonas Oldacre. This morning, I learned that Oldacre was murdered last night, burned to death in his own house, and the police think I did it." "Why would they suspect you?" Watson asks, already reaching for his medical bag, concerned the young man might faint from stress. McFarlane pulls out a crumpled newspaper. "Because, according to Oldacre's will, the will I prepared last night, he's left his entire fortune to me. £50,000 to a man he barely knew. The police think I killed him for the inheritance." Holmes's eyes narrow with interest. "You say he barely knew you? Yet he made you his sole heir? That is rather extraordinary, wouldn't you say?" Think about this carefully, detective. What kind of man leaves his fortune to a virtual stranger? What possible motive could Jonas Oldacre have for such a bizarre bequest? McFarlane explains in a rush. "Oldacre claimed he knew my parents years ago before I was born. He said he wanted to make amends for some old disagreement with my father. The whole thing seemed strange, but clients do odd things with their wills. I didn't question it. I just drew up the documents as requested." "And where were you last night after leaving Mr. Oldacre?" Holmes asks with deceptive casualness. This is the crucial question, the one that will either prove McFarlane's innocence or damn him forever. "I worked late at my office going over the will documents. I didn't leave until nearly midnight. Then I went straight home to my parents' house in Blackheath. But here's the problem. I can't prove it. No one saw me." Watson looks troubled. "So you have no alibi for the time of the murder?" McFarlane shakes his head desperately. "None. And it gets worse. The police found my walking stick at the crime scene, covered in blood. They found burned remains in Oldacre's timber yard that they claim are his body. And witnesses saw me leaving his house at 9:30 last night. I was the last person to see him alive." Holmes springs up, energized by the challenge. "Excellent. The more hopeless the case appears, the more interesting it becomes. Tell me, Mr. McFarlane, what was your impression of Jonas Oldacre? Did he seem like a man preparing to die?" "On the contrary," McFarlane replies, thinking back. "He seemed quite healthy and energetic. He was planning business ventures, talking about future construction projects. There was no indication he expected to die anytime soon." Holmes exchanges a significant glance with Watson. "Can you spot the inconsistency here, detective?" Before they can discuss further, heavy footsteps pound up the stairs. Inspector Lestrade enters, accompanied by 2 constables. "Mr. John Hector McFarlane, I'm placing you under arrest for the willful murder of Jonas Oldacre. Come along quietly now." "One moment, Lestrade," Holmes interrupts smoothly. Surely you can spare 5 minutes to explain your evidence. After all, I've only just returned to London, and I'm eager to see how Scotland Yard's methods have evolved in my absence. There's just enough mockery in his tone to prick Lestrade's pride. Lestrade bristles but can't resist the chance to prove himself. The evidence is overwhelming, Mr. Holmes. Jonas Oldacre was murdered last night in his house at Lower Norwood. His body was burned in the timber yard behind his house. We have the murder weapon, McFarlane's walking stick, found at the scene with blood and hair on it. We have motive, a £50,000 inheritance, and we have opportunity. McFarlane admits he was there last night. Fascinating, Holmes murmurs. And the body? You're certain it's Oldacre? Lestrade shifts uncomfortably. Well, the remains are badly burned, but we found metal trouser buttons and burnt bone fragments. Who else could it be? Holmes's eyebrow arches. Who else indeed? Tell me, Lestrade, did you find any evidence that Oldacre actually died in that fire? Was there smoke in his lungs? Any signs that he was alive when the burning began? The inspector's confidence wavers slightly. The remains were too badly damaged for a proper medical examination, but everything points to what someone wanted you to believe. Holmes cuts him off. But I'm sure Scotland Yard knows what it's doing. Take Mr. McFarlane if you must, but I promise you, this case is not what it appears to be. After the police leave with their prisoner, Watson turns to Holmes. You think he's innocent? Holmes is already pulling on his coat. I'm certain of it, Watson. This entire affair stinks of elaborate deception. Someone has gone to tremendous lengths to frame young McFarlane, and I intend to discover why. But the evidence seems so conclusive, Watson protests. The walking stick, the will, the lack of alibi. Holmes smiles. That predatory smile you've learned means he's several steps ahead. Precisely. It's too conclusive. Real murders are messy, chaotic affairs. This one has been staged like a theatrical performance, with every piece of evidence carefully placed for maximum effect. Holmes and Watson travel to Lower Norwood to examine the crime scene. The house is a substantial villa with a large timber yard behind it, where Oldacre conducted his building business. The yard is filled with wooden planks, beams, and stacks of lumber. Perfect fuel for a hot fire. Look here, Watson. Holmes points to the burned area where the body was supposedly found. This fire was deliberately set and carefully controlled. See how the burning is concentrated in one small area? A genuine accident would have spread more randomly. And notice the wind direction last night would have blown flames away from the house, not toward it. This was planned. They examined the walking stick that supposedly belonged to McFarlane. Holmes studies it under his magnifying glass. Interesting. Fresh bloodstains, but notice how they're concentrated on one end. If this stick had been used to bludgeon someone to death, there would be blood spray patterns smearing, signs of repeated impact. This looks more like blood was deliberately daubed onto the stick after the fact. Watson is beginning to see the pattern. Someone is framing McFarlane, but who would go to such elaborate lengths, and why? Holmes's expression grows grim. That's what we need to discover. Let's speak with Oldacre's household and see what secrets they're hiding. The housekeeper, Mrs. Lexington, proves to be a nervous woman who clearly knows more than she's saying. Holmes's gentle questioning reveals that Oldacre had been acting strangely in the days before his death, burning old documents, meeting with mysterious visitors, and showing unusual interest in McFarlane's family. Did Mr. Oldacre have any enemies? Holmes asks casually. Mrs. Lexington's face tightens. He was not a pleasant man to work for, Mr. Holmes. Quick to anger, slow to pay his bills, and he had a vindictive streak. There was bad blood between him and McFarlane's mother years ago. She refused his marriage proposal and chose another man. Holmes's eyes gleam with sudden understanding. Ah, now we begin to see the real motive. This isn't about money at all. It's about revenge. Oldacre never forgave being rejected, and now he's found a way to destroy the son of the woman who spurned him. But that makes no sense, Watson objects. If Oldacre wanted revenge, why leave his fortune to McFarlane? Why not just frame him without the inheritance? Holmes chuckles darkly. Because the inheritance is what makes the frame-up believable. It provides the motive that Scotland Yard needs to secure a conviction. Without it, the case falls apart. They continue their investigation, and Holmes makes a crucial discovery in Oldacre's bedroom, a secret door hidden behind a wardrobe, leading to a concealed space large enough for a man to hide. "Look at this, Watson. Fresh scratches on the floor where the wardrobe was moved, and the air in this hidden room has been disturbed recently. I can smell cigar smoke. Think about what this means, detective. If Oldacre isn't dead, if he's been hiding in his own house all along, what kind of twisted mind would conceive such a plot? What does it say about his hatred that he'd sacrifice his own comfortable life just to see an innocent man hang?" Holmes sets a trap. He convinces Lestrade to allow a thorough search of Oldacre's house, making sure word spreads throughout the neighborhood that the police are looking for additional evidence. "Make it known that you're searching for something specific," Holmes instructs. "Let everyone hear that you're looking for the final proof that will send McFarlane to the gallows." That night, Holmes, Watson, and Lestrade return to the house with a police team. Holmes directs them to search the bedrooms, making considerable noise and commotion. Then, with everyone assembled in the hallway, Holmes suddenly shouts, "Fire! I smell smoke!" Panic erupts in the house. Servants rush about looking for flames. And in the confusion, a hidden door bursts open and a figure emerges from behind the wardrobe. Jonas Oldacre himself, very much alive, covered in dust and looking furious at being driven from his hiding place by the false alarm. "Good evening, Mr. Oldacre," Holmes says pleasantly. "Or should I say, good morning. You've been dead for nearly 24 hours now. How does it feel to be resurrected? Though I suspect your resurrection will be considerably less pleasant than mine was." Oldacre's face contorts with rage and defeat. "You meddling fool. Everything was perfect. McFarlane would have hanged, and everyone would have thought justice was served. The son of that woman who rejected me would have paid for her sins." Lestrade, stunned by this development, stammers, "But the body in the timber yard, the burned remains." Holmes explains, "There was no body, Inspector. Oldacre burned animal bones and added the metal buttons from an old pair of trousers. In the dark, with flames obscuring details, everyone assumed they were looking at human remains. No one thought to examine them closely." "And the blood on the walking stick?" Watson asks. Holmes holds up the stick. "Animal blood, I suspect, or possibly Oldacre's own blood, which he was willing to shed to make his frame-up convincing. He probably cut himself slightly and applied it to the stick he'd stolen from McFarlane during the young man's visit. The full scope of Oldacre's plan becomes clear. He'd contacted McFarlane deliberately, pretending to want to make amends with his family. He'd convinced the young solicitor to come to his house, drafted a will leaving everything to McFarlane, and then staged his own death with McFarlane as the obvious suspect. The motive, the opportunity, the evidence, all carefully constructed to ensure an innocent man would hang for a murder that never happened. "But why?" Lestrade asks, still struggling to understand such elaborate malice. Oldacre's eyes burn with decades-old hatred. "Because Catherine McFarlane, John's mother, destroyed my life when she rejected me 40 years ago. She chose that pathetic clerk over me, and I vowed that someday, somehow, I would make her suffer. What better revenge than to see her son executed for murder?" Holmes's voice is cold with contempt. "You planned to hide in your secret room until after McFarlane was convicted and executed. Then you would have emerged with some story about amnesia or being kidnapped, and no one could have touched you. The victim alive again, the convicted murderer already dead. The perfect crime. It would have worked if you hadn't interfered." Oldacre spits. "Everything was planned perfectly. The evidence was overwhelming. Even his own lawyer had given up hope." Holmes shakes his head. "That's precisely what made me suspicious. Real evidence is never that perfect, Mr. Oldacre. Your elaborate frame-up was too good, too complete. You overlooked the fundamental rule of deception. The more perfect something appears, the more likely it's been manufactured." With Oldacre's arrest, McFarlane is immediately released from custody. The young solicitor can barely express his gratitude. "Mr. Holmes, you saved my life. I was headed for the gallows, and you pulled me back at the last possible moment." Holmes dismisses the thanks with characteristic modesty. You should thank your mother's good sense in rejecting Jonas Oldacre 40 years ago. If she'd married him instead of your father, you would never have existed, which, in Oldacre's twisted logic, would have accomplished the same goal as seeing you hanged. Back at Baker Street, Watson reflects on the case. This was different from our usual murders, Holmes. No one actually died, yet it seemed just as evil. Perhaps more so. Oldacre was willing to destroy an innocent man's life purely for revenge against a woman who rejected him decades ago. Holmes nods thoughtfully. Some people nurse their grievances like beloved children, Watson, feeding them and watching them grow until they become monsters that consume everything around them. Oldacre spent 40 years planning his revenge, letting his hatred fester until it poisoned his entire existence. In many ways, he destroyed his own life more thoroughly than he ever could have destroyed the McFarlanes. But we stopped him, Watson says with satisfaction. Holmes allows himself a small smile. We did indeed. Though I must admit, it was rather clever of me to use the false fire alarm to smoke him out. Quite literally. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. So tell me, Detective, did you spot the inconsistencies in the evidence before Holmes explained them? Could you have guessed that Oldacre was hiding in his own house? And what does this case teach us about the danger of letting old grudges fester into obsessive hatred? This chilling case reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous criminals aren't those who kill in passion or for profit, but those who plan their evil with cold calculation over years or even decades. The Norwood Builder built more than houses. He constructed an elaborate trap designed to destroy an innocent man's life as completely as any murder weapon. It also shows us that in Holmes's world, death itself can be faked, evidence can be manufactured, and nothing is quite as it appears on the surface. The great detective's genius lies not just in observing details, but in recognizing when those details are too perfect, too convenient, too carefully arranged to be genuine. Join me next time as we investigate The Adventure of the Dancing Men, where Holmes must decipher a mysterious code of stick figures before it's too late to save a woman from her dangerous past.